What up, YouTube? It's me, Johnny, back at it again with another video. And today I'm going to be talking about Loki Season 2. And by the title of the video, I'm sure you all guessed that I think Loki Season 2 was the best show of the latest batch anyway by a mile. Now, I don't think it was better than Season 1, but not going to actually, talk about that or try to compare the two in this video. What I want to do instead is talk about why, if you haven't, you should watch Loki Season 2. And I also want to go through some theories of mine as to what it means for the rest of the MCU. But before I dive into the video, if you enjoy the content you're listening to, please, for me, like the video, subscribe to the page, and hit that notification bell so that way anytime a new video comes out, you will be alerted. Also, if you want additional content from me, check out my podcast, anywhere podcasts are being played, by searching the same name as the YouTube page. But without further ado, let me dive into this. So in case you haven't watched any of Loki's Season 2, there will be spoilers, so keep that in mind. After watching, the first 5 episodes with a 6th to come a little later this week, the overall plot of the show, in my opinion, is well written, and from a Marvel comic book fan, it ties into one of the Loki storylines that I believe pretty well, but more on that here in a little bit. So early on, we see Loki time slipping, as it's called, and I really thought this was the same as what we actually got to see in Across the Spideyverse, which is out on Netflix. If you were one of the few that didn't actually see it in theater, you can see it for free now. But we learned in the first episode that it's not actually the same thing. For anyone wondering, what the difference is between the two, the glitching that we saw in Across the Spider-Verse with Miles and the other Spider folks, that was actually due to them traveling to another universe that isn't their own, wherein what we actually see in Loki Season 2 in time slipping deals with him being pulled through time that can end up being anywhere at any point in time in any universe. In the show, we get introduced to several new characters like Ouroboros, played by Ki-Hoo Won. We get X5, aka Brad Wolf, played by Raphael Cassell. And then, of course, we get Victor Timely, played by Jonathan Majors, who I actually talked about on my Breaking Down Each Variant of Kang video. So check that out if you actually want more on him. And then, of course, other variants of Kang. But we also got to see more from characters that we got little from in like the first season. Now, I think another good touch to the show was giving us some look into their lives prior to the TVA. We know and get to see somewhat about how he remains once he won the multiversal war, pulled each character to TVA from their lives and wiped their memories in Season 1. So to actually bring in that and not leave it, open or untouched, I feel was a win for the fans, and, a big thumbs up to the writers for actually considering that. The other part about the show that is great in my opinion is that each character we get to see feels like they are important to the show and they actually add value. Well, then again, the one character that didn't actually feel that way in my opinion was actually B-15 and Casey to a degree. Now, later in the episode, they would play a major-ish role, but it kind of felt like it was forced. And here's what I mean by that. So at the end of episode 4, we see them all in the TVA trying to stop the loom from malfunctioning and basically, destroying all the timelines in the multiverse. And they weren't successful, so it appeared that this was going to be the end of the multiverse, which, by the way, I'm not going to lie, the way it happened, I did not see that coming at all. I promise you, once they got Victor Timely into the TVA and into that suit, I thought that the day was saved and that they were going to be able to fix it. And when he walked out there and was disintegrated, I was like, wow, that's pretty nuts. It really was. It was a greatly written and timed moment in the show to actually have that happen. But then, Season 5 starts and every single one of them are gone except Loki standing in the TVA. Later in the episode, we find out that everyone, had been actually sent back to their lives prior to the TVA, and Loki, was time slipping to each one of them randomly. Now, stick with me a little bit longer here because I'm actually getting to a point. But anyway, fast forwarding a bit, we learned that each one of the people he is time slipping to has somewhat of a time signature, if you will, that's supposed to be important for Loki to get back to the TVA and also help him control his time slipping. Now, at the end of that episode, he gets all of them together only to find out that he didn't need them to actually help control his slipping, since he masters that while all of time is basically getting destroyed and wiped out right in front of him. Loki could have actually mastered that without B-15 and Casey being there, in my opinion, which is why I believe those characters' importance were more forced than they actually had to be. By the way, this is actually a perfect segue to talk about how Loki is going to play, a greater role in the MCU as a whole. So with Loki mastering time slipping, he can now basically go anywhere at any point of time to change it, which is a pretty OP power if you actually think about it. I mean, I think it might be the most OP power we have seen so far in the MCU, because it's kind of akin to a power that the One Above All has, which is the ability to make any story be what he wants it to be, well, at least in that moment. I bet you that Loki Season 2 is based on a character of his we got in Marvel Comics, which was called the God of Stories. This version of Loki we got in Marvel Comics, and it's who I believe, we're seeing right now in the MCU. This all started with a comic called The Siege on Asgard. I think some people just call it Siege. I think the comic just called Siege, but it's called The Siege of Asgard, where Loki sacrificed himself trying to stop the Void from destroying Asgard, and he died. Now, prior to his death, Loki kind of found out that no matter what, his character was always meant to be mischievous and to cause chaos, something that he was actually told, if you remember, back in season 1 of Loki. But in Marvel Comics, he actually wanted to change that. Kind of sort of what he's trying to do here. In, I believe, a Loki one-shot comic called Siege Number 1, he found a way to actually convince Hela, if y'all remember her from Thor Ragnarok, he actually convinced her to remove his name from the Book of Hell, so when he would die, instead of going to, hell, he would actually be able to be reborn, which is what happened after he died. It's how we actually got, the Kid Loki story in Marvel Comics. Now, anyway, after being reborn, getting his memory somewhat restored by Thor in Thor issue number 617, once Thor found Loki on Earth, I forgot where it was, but anyway, he found him on Earth. He was basically able to, at that point, Loki was, to write his own fate, which was completely different from what it had always been in Marvel Comics up to that point. Skipping over a lot of the story, so sorry to my knowledgeable comic book fans out there who may, know about this story. But once the reborn, Kid Loki let his prior self, known for the mischievousness and such, take over his mind and albeit his body in the Journey into Mystery number 622 comic, the old Loki felt bad for his actions, something that had never actually happened to him prior to this. Is why we saw Kid Loki doing a lot of heroic things, trying to, kind of make amends once he got his memory back for some of the stuff he did. Anyway, later he found a place called the House of Ideas, which allowed him to change any story in the moment. This is what I believe we're seeing in the MCU in Loki season 2 right now. Now, how this ties, into the greater MCU into the future, I think it actually has something to do with the Secret Wars movie that we will get. I know that we got the Secret Invasion TV show, but I don't think any of that will play a role into the movie simply because, that show was terrible and no one watched it. Sorry, Samuel, that show was terrible. But I believe that Loki and a team he will, actually, build by time slipping and using his powers to, to gather them at different points in time. He will actually get these people together to help fight Kang and all of his variants to stop them from taking over the multiverse. And that will be basically Secret Wars. Now, that's my theory, and if it is true, amongst some of the other reasons I gave, I think is why you should actually watch Loki season 2. But let me know in the comments if you have either, watched or plan on watching Loki season 2. Do you think any of what I said lines up to, the show and what we might actually get to see in the MCU going forward? Who knows? I've been wrong about almost all of my theories going forward, so let's see if I'm right on this one. But with that said, let me know what you think in the comments. And until the next video, I will talk to you all later. Peace.